Thank you for being here. It is 5:04, and with all board members present, we're going to call this meeting to order. And tonight, our pledge and the moment of silence will be led by Mr. Norman, if you'll stand.
Thank you for our moment of silence. Okay, let's face the flag, salute, and pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, just one announcement, a reminder that our July board meetings have been rescheduled from July 3rd and 5th to Monday, July 10th for our work session and Wednesday, July 12th for our regular session, and both meetings will begin at the regular start time of 5 o'clock. Dave Wright is here tonight, Chairman of the County Commission. Thank you, Commissioner Wright, for being in attendance. Okay, changes to the agenda. Board members, following discussion at Monday's work session, you should have received by email yesterday revised versions of the first reading policies J191, J193, J194, and J211. Hard copies of those revisions are at the table for our discussion tonight. Also, you received by email a newly created resolution regarding agenda item 10D in reference to the property located at the Sammy Hill Family Community Center. A copy of the resolution is attached to your agenda. At this time, I would like to, as board chair, withdraw agenda item 10A. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, do I have?
Move approval.
Okay, Ms.
Of the agenda as amended with item 10A taken off.
Okay. Okay, motion made by Ms. Fugit, seconded by Ms. Dethridge. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, tonight we have a special recognition of Sydney Rowell, and to do that, I will refer to Superintendent Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the board audience. As you know, a new student representative to the Board of Education for the 2017-18 term will be joining us in July. So tonight will be Sydney Rowell's last official meeting as your student representative. I know that I, along with all the board members, will be sad to see Sydney leave, but we're also very excited about her bright future and certainly wish her great success in her future endeavors. Let me take just a minute to salute Sydney for some of her many accomplishments. She recently graduated from our Hardin Valley Academy with a weighted grade point average of 4.24. She served as a STEM Academy representative and executive board member of the Student Government Association. She participated with the Technology Student Association and served as business manager on the school newspaper staff. Sydney was also a STEM ambassador, a Talons mentor to incoming freshmen, and she was a member of the National Honor Society. By the end of her junior year, Sydney had completed 5 semesters of Mandarin Chinese, including AP Chinese. Also, Sydney's completed AP Government and Politics, AP U.S. History, and AP Literature. She participated in the C-SPAN Student Chem Contest and built a working radiation shield for the UT Engineering Day competition. Sydney, in addition to all of her accomplishments at Hardin Valley, has also been involved in community service, and her projects have included a monthly service at Thrive Lonsdale, which provides a safe place for underprivileged elementary and middle school students to go after school, a bi-weekly service at Faith Promise Church and the Children's Ministry, and she's done seasonal volunteer work with Empty Stocking Fund and also Fantasy of Trees. Most recently, Sydney represented not only Knox County schools and the Knox County community, but also the whole state as one of 2 student leaders from Tennessee in the United States Senate Youth Program. She's been awarded a $10,000 scholarship for undergraduate studies, and she spent a week in Washington, D.C. during March, where she experienced our national government in action. Sydney will be attending American University School of International Service in Washington, D.C. this fall. And we want to take this opportunity to thank you for your service to Knox County Schools and for representing our district and this board so well. Congratulations and best wishes, Sydney. And Sydney would like for the entire board to join her up front for a photograph. So at this time, Sydney, give Sydney a round of applause for her service and her accomplishments.
But I haven't met her yet. I've heard her name.
I don't know if she went to partner with Avery Flatford's ass. They play baseball together. At Powell. Yeah. I think he was a year older than Bart.
Just Jordan Such. You're
Yeah, that's right.
Where are we? Yes, we're ready for Ms. Coatney.
Okay, item 6, consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Roundtree,
Second.
seconded by Ms. Fugit. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7A, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy C-180, advertising and solicitation in schools as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Oh, discussion, yes. Is there any discussion? I like to just move through this. Is there any discussion?
I wasn't paying attention.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy E-173, private vehicles for transporting students as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
7C, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy F-150, new project planning as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7D, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G-130, employee complaints and grievances as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
7E, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G-131, complaints about school personnel as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Norman. Seconded by Ms. Dethridge. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
7F, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G140, Staff Student Relations as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
7G, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G150, Staff Community Relations as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7H, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G190, Salary Deductions as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Dethridge. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7I, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G200, Academic Freedoms as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7J, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G220, Harassment of Employees as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7K, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G230, Personnel Definitions as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7L, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G240, Compensation Guides and Contracts for Professional Personnel as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7M, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G280, Qualifications and Duties of Teachers as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7N, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G290, Hiring Personnel as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7O, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G310, Job Sharing as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Roundtree, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7P, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G330, Tenure as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
7Q, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy G180, Personnel Files as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Ms. Owen,
I would like to amend the motion and add, after disciplinary action as appropriate, to add to that, and any response from the employee, which would make it as we originally discussed in that committee. So number 6, disciplinary action as appropriate, add the words, and any response from the employee.
On line 12.
Yes, yes, line 12. 12. Line 12, it's number 6, disciplinary action as appropriate.
Added what?
And add to that, and any employee response, because the employee is allowed to respond, so I want to be sure that that's clear.
Mr.
Second
Norman.
agrees. Second agrees. I'm good.
Okay. Okay, any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of the amended motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. Then we vote on it as so we'll go back to the original. So we have a first and a second.
First light's still on.
Who's this? Jennifer, did you want to? Your line's still on. Did you want to speak? Okay. Okay, so is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7R, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J152, student transfers within the system as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion on this? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7S, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J191, misbehaviors and disciplinary options as amended.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Dethridge, seconded by Ms. Fugit. Discussion? Mr. Norman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just had a lot of thoughts about the disciplinary language that's being added into these policies, and I'm just not comfortable with what I feel like may be a move. If this is a pendulum, there's a move too far to the other side, and I'm worried that the policies will start to erode the discretion of the principal and the classroom teacher in terms of what they can do in a situation that requires them some kind of disciplinary action. And so I think there needs to be a more comprehensive look at all of the policies regarding discipline than what we've been able to do. And especially, I think that we need input from more teachers and more principals about the language that we're using. I would hope that at the very least we could email copies of amended language or whatever we're doing for all teachers and all principals to see and give them a chance to respond to those changes. And I think that certainly in the middle school and high school levels, I'd like to see some kind of review, a process. What is going on? What is being expected and shared with staffs, especially in middle and high school, in terms of how they're to deal with discipline. So I just have a lot of questions, and I think that if we go ahead and approve these policy changes right now, I think that just would not be wise at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Like I said on Monday, I would like to slow down a little bit with what we're doing here. I think that the committee put in a lot of really good work, but the changes that we had on Monday did not fully match the changes that we made in the committee, in our policy review committee. And having gotten them just yesterday, the public hasn't had time to look at those and give us any input. Principals and their staffs haven't had time to look at those and give us any input. I don't feel like it's a very transparent process to have these policy changes the day of the vote when the community is not necessarily prepared to address those. So I would like to see S, T, U, and V put off until next month.
Ms. Fugit?
Are you taking personal privilege?
No, I'm just making a suggestion.
Okay, I mean, I'm just, because unless you take personal privilege, then we have to vote or something.
Making it part of.
Okay, okay.
So,
There's a motion on the floor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so is this, help me out, Mr. Duport. There was a motion on the floor already for this, and we were
Gloria
just...
wants to talk.
Gloria?
Did she make a motion, or did she?
Okay, we'll finish this. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's my understanding that the committee that worked on this also worked and got a lot of this information and a lot of information and suggestions, and the principals had a chance to look and kind of converse with them through the process. That's what I understood through our policy review meeting. And I know that a lot of the policy is more general statements that we still have a chance to look at and make recommendations within 30 days. A lot of the processes is in procedures on how we implement these policies. So the policy is really just a general statement of what we're planning. The addition they made was really what we discussed on Monday, according to the training not been completed with all the schools. So they changed it to where only dealing with those schools where the training has been completed, and they would use those to the extent practicable, I can't even say it, but anyway, possible. So it really is, we did do a lot of discussion, and a lot of things that we discussed at the policy review is already reflected. I don't know what else, because I went back and looked at my notes, and I don't see a lot of things that were missing from our previous discussion in policy review. And so the committee's been working on this since October. And I'd hate to think that the committee and the group that came together to discuss the disciplinary actions that the school board and the Knox County Schools been taking has not been what they wanted, so they decided to have decisions and made recommendations. The committee's gone back. They have looked at this, vetted this, worked on, like I said, since October. And I really think that the Knox County and the community is waiting for us to come up with some kind of policy revision. And they don't want to wait another year. And it's not really been a slow process on our part. It's been recommendations from the committee. So I think that we need to also look at this, and we are responsible for the policy as a school board. And I think that a lot of what they have recommended is in here now. I did see some things that I would like to discuss at our next policy review that came from Mr. McCall. I did see some things I think that we may want to look at and may want to add to what we'll be discussing at our next policy review before we bring it to the board next month. But I don't think we need to wait and hold off on all these policies that they have diligently been working on, because we are not feeling secure on a few recommendations from some people saying that they did not go through the principals and some committee members and some community people, because that's who's on the task force. So I think that we have their input. We just have to look at it and see if we agree with them, and then agree to look at this through first reading and come back on second reading with some other recommendations if we don't necessarily agree with everything in this policy right now. But if we don't, then we're going to start another school year without any disciplinary policies that the principals can use to start the school year with, and we're going to continue doing what we've been doing, y'all. And I don't know if that's what the committee and the other community want us to do. They want us to make changes, and they want us to look at it, and they want us to move forward. So I don't necessarily think we need to hold off on first reading. Now, we might have to think about something on second, but this is the first reading, which gives us 30 more days to look at it and make changes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Etheridge. Ms. Fugit?
No, I don't. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
your light's on. Okay, Ms. Hill?
I'm addressing specifically S, which is the one we are currently talking about.
Which is the motion
correct?
that's on the floor,
Okay.
yes.
To your comment, Ms. Owens, about, I think I heard you say R, S, T, U, and V. Help me, I guess, Mr. Davis, if I'm correct about this. S, what I read in our amendments of S basically states, I think, that as far as when we get to misbehavior and disciplinary options, that where training's been completed, that we will use restorative practices. Is that correct? All right, and I understand from the task force that this is the recommendation that they brought and that we adopted. Is that correct?
Oh, Dr. Davis.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. And also, quite a bit of the language that has been removed from that policy has also been included in the guidelines as well. I believe that's correct, Ms. Massey, so yes.
And thank you, Mr. Davis, that was what I was thinking. And like you, Ms. Owens and Mr. Norman, I'm struggling a little bit with what may or may not be taken away from the principals and their ability to have autonomy in their schools, which I keep being told is going to be under procedures and guidelines. Is that correct?
That is correct, and also, and Ms. Massey can speak to this, but the principals have weighed in on this. I know I sat in on a principal meeting, and they gave quite a bit of input and feedback related to the discipline policies as well as the guidelines. And so they've had quite a bit of feedback, and on the guidelines, they will continue to have feedback. Am I correct? So they will continue to weigh in until we get to a point where they feel comfortable, and then even after putting those guidelines in place, there will still be opportunities for the principals to have continued dialogue to make changes along the way as needed.
Okay. Regarding S, I think what we're reading here is that we're agreeing to adopt restorative practices, which is something that is already, this board has already decided. To your point about TU and VEMA, so-and-so, I would support holding off on those because they tend to get more into specific actions being taken. So as far as S goes, which is on the table now, I believe this is what we've already agreed to per recommendations of the task force.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to get some clarification from Ms. Massey about the KCS student support guidelines and when those will be completed then before the board votes on the second reading of this policy? I just wanted to, for folks that maybe were, I know you talked about this on Monday, but for clarity's sake, if you don't care to address that.
Thank you, Ms. Roundtree. Yes, we are in the process now of getting input from principals, and we'll be making some adjustments. We've had, and just to kind of give a little brief history, if you don't mind, and we started this process in October, and as the discipline committees have met, and I've discussed previously, those are 3 subcommittees, every month at the principals meeting, we had probably roughly 25 principals or assistant principals on our committee. At every meeting, those people stood up after we reviewed where we were in the process, just to, and we prepared for every principal a packet to take back to their school and do the same activity that we had done at the principals meeting, because exactly right, Mr. Norman, it's very important to us that we have input from our teachers, and there were some teachers that served on the committee as well, and that this didn't come as a surprise to anybody, that they knew that we were going on this journey. So we've been very transparent, I think, with principals and talking about we were anticipating some changes. We currently have guidelines now for discipline, but those are that, and just like the other would be, there's always circumstances where principals may have to look at the particulars of a situation and make a decision. There's nothing in that would preclude that from happening, and those are always reviewed, but that process is in place if something happens that a principal needs to step outside of the guidelines.
So where would you say the guideline, how close are the guidelines to being actually completed?
I would say very close. We are just, I'm waiting on, I've gotten feedback from everybody but one set, so I'm waiting on those, and I sent message today to get those. I'd hope to have them completed, but I'm.
And I know that was a concern that was raised in an email that we would be voting on this policy and that the guidelines themselves weren't complete, but it is a first reading, which means we can go back and, in particular with this policy, revise it maybe once we see those guidelines at our second reading. So thank you, Ms. Massey.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Owen, with your permission, I'm going to go to Ms. Fugit and Mr. McMillan and then come back to you since they haven't spoken to the issue. Is that okay? Okay. Ms.
Thank
Fugit.
you. This time I did mean to have my light on, so thank you. I was just going to say that the one thing I think for us to keep in mind is the board sets policy. The guidelines are really administrative guidelines that the superintendent is responsible for to execute with his staff. Guideline means guideline. It doesn't mean absolute. I agree with you, Mr. Norman. We have professionals and we compensate them to be principals of their building and use discretion when need be. I'm not getting into the weeds about what these say. I'm just saying in general, this is the yin and the yang the board always goes through. We set policy, and yet I think a lot of times people want us to get real descriptive, and our job is really just to set the higher order policy and be clear to our superintendent of what expectations we have. That's all I was going to say.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are several board members here who have had personal experience at the, in teaching, but particularly since Mr. Norman mentioned the middle school and high school level, where I think the discipline tends to, as the kids become older, it becomes somewhat more difficult from the teacher standpoint to deal with it in certain instances. But the principal at the school sets the tone for the discipline in the school, as well as for other things that go on in school. And I just think that that we don't need to rush into anything until we are sure that we're doing something that's going to be beneficial. Sometimes things look good on paper, but when they're put into practice, it doesn't work out that way. I mean, I could cite some examples, but I won't. But I don't see that it would hurt anything for us to put these items off for 30 days. And that doesn't mean that we can't come back and do it, but like what Mr. Norman was saying, get some feedback from the people that are going to be charged with implementing this policy, and not just the principals, but the classroom teachers. That's where it begins and who has to deal with it. Therefore, I'll make a motion that we postpone the first reading on S, T, U, and V for 30 days.
Substitute motion.
It's a substitute, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I'm staying corrected. It's a substitute motion since there's a motion already on the floor.
Okay, Mr. McMillan's made a motion, a substitute motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Norman. All in favor of the substitute motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, an aye. Okay, so the substitute motion carries, and that takes the place of the original motion, if that is correct. So we will.
But it does. It takes care of all of that.
True. So, Ms. Coatney?
You're voting opposed? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Bounds?
Jennifer does. Okay, go ahead.
So,
I have a clarifying, I'm sorry, I have a clarifying question, if I may.
Yes,
So
Ms.
if we're
Fugit.
going to postpone and we want teacher input, who's going to be responsible for getting that, and how are we going to do that? I just throw that out there because if we're postponing for 30 days to get teacher, so Ms. Massey, I guess that falls to you as chairing of that committee or something. So I just ask that the board chair and the superintendent figure out how we're going to get that done and have a report back to us if this is coming back before us in 30 days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Miss-
I'm gonna have to miss on if you don't mind. It don't matter. I was just gonna say, we're out for the summer, so are you gonna deal with, yeah. It's gonna be a little bit more difficult. If the teachers are out during the summer, how are you gonna, I don't know. That's not my problem.
Okay. So, Ms. Massey, we will get together with Superintendent Thomas and we'll work it out, and then Ms. Coatney can send out the information to the board members. Is that okay with everyone? Ms. Owen, your light's still on. Is that for the next policy? Oh, it's this policy that just,
I was going to clarify my intent, but
okay, go ahead. I'll let Ms. Fugit.
I have no objection with the language as it is right now. I want to be very clear with that. What I have an objection to is that we published one set of revisions in the agenda last week. So people had a week to look at that agenda and look at those revisions and communicate with us. And then this set of revisions that we have today, they have not had time to look at and communicate with us. So it's not that they haven't had time to deal with the revisions, it's that what we published for our agenda is not the same as what we are looking at right now. So that's the whole point that I was trying to get to.
Okay.
It's not that there's a problem with the language, but that if there were, there would be no way for people to have looked at that and
Okay.
communicate with us when we publish one thing and then vote on something else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Coatney.
Item 8A, approve receipt of funds for a voluntary pre-K grant from the State of Tennessee Department of Education for 2017-2018 in the amount of $2,014,203 with required in-kind and matching funds of $1,243,806.52.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Roundtree, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion on this? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
8B, approve Tennessee Community Crime Reduction Program small grant application form and receipt of funds for Vine Middle Magnet School in the amount of $13,415.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Dethridge, seconded by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
8C, approve receipt of funds in the amount of $10,000 from a Blue Cross Blue Shield 2017 Shape the State grant for Northwest Middle School for physical education equipment for students and a stipend for the Wellness, Nutrition, Physical Education Program for staff professional development and travel reimbursement.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
8D, approve resolution allowing the application for and acceptance of grants in the amount of $7,850.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Roundtree, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
8E, approve donation from Faith Promise Church of audio-visual equipment and installation with an approximate value of $172,124.40 to Farragut High School.
Motion by Ms. Horn, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries.
8F, approve donation from Kingston Pike Sequoia Hills Association in the amount of $44,053 for Sequoia Elementary School fencing project.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Fugit, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
9A, approve contract with Baseline Sports Construction LLC for provision of track resurfacing and restriping services annually as needed for a term of 1 year with the option to renew for an additional 4 years, 1 year at a time, for a total of 5 years.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries.
9B, approve form contract for provision of student transportation services to Knox County schools.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? Oh, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know we talked quite a bit about this on Monday evening, but just for information purposes, there, for the people that are watching it at home and the public that might not have seen this, I'd like to have Dr. Grubb come up for just a minute, and I want to, while he's coming up, I'd like to make a couple of comments that I think some people that are involved in this may be somewhat, I hesitate to use the word confused, but there was kind of somewhat of a misunderstanding. Originally, when we started with this, and Dr. Grubb, when I get through making these comments, you either correct me or confirm what I have said, please, if you'll do so. Originally, when this all started, the intent was to do $1 million a year, and it was promoted as giving to each of the contractors for each one that each contract that they had. There was some equipment and stuff that they were going to do, but we were originally going to do $300 per bus. And also, part of the salesmanship, I guess, or the way of promoting it to this body as well as county commission was that this came at a very critical time after the bus accident and everything, and we were looking at possibility of having better driver training, and we've done some things along those lines, and we even talked in terms of maybe establishing a minimum wage for them somewhere down the road. Now, I think you told us on Monday evening that we couldn't do that, and it's my understanding in talking to several people that even if we could, it's probably not necessary because the contractors are having such difficulty getting drivers that they're forced to pay well beyond the minimum wage. But it got to the point where when the budget was approved, I think maybe the contractors were still under the assumption that because they wound up with 300 last year, that they were going to wind up with 300 this year. But that was prior to budget adoption. And when the budget was adopted, there was not $1 million adopted, there was only $875,000. Is that correct, Dr. Grubb? Or 76, somewhere thereabouts, rough numbers.
We're very close to being correct, yes.
Okay.
The understanding that I have through the Chief Operations Officer, Russ, and he and I have had ongoing discussions, even though he's been out, was we were looking at it as transportation initiatives. And some of that was for training, some of that was for upgrading infrastructure, some of that was for enhancing our customer service functions, some of that was for providing oversight to drivers with our check ride program. All of those things were encompassed into what the $1 million commitment that the two previous superintendents had indicated they would provide to the transportation budget. When we got those numbers and we received from the finance department, what the allocations were going to be for transportation this year, the amounts that we were able to do and meet the other criteria that we had to meet, the $200 a month was the most we could capture. and meet the other requirements and the needs. Compensation for contractors also includes additional vehicles, additional buses. And there's no differentiation in the line item for what goes to a additional bus and what goes to a daily rate. So that's where Russ and I were working from as we develop the budget, one line item at a time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I just wanted to reiterate some of that stuff so that anybody that did not understand hopefully understands exactly what happened. Many times when the budget's approved, it doesn't, we don't always get what we intend to get once it's adopted. But thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, we have a motion made by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Owen. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9C, approve agreement with Centus to approve uniform and cleaning supply rental services per U.S. Communities contract for Knox County Schools Maintenance and Operations Department for up to $50,000 annually.
Motion made by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Horn. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
9D, approve contract with Henley Roofing Company in the amount of $549,943 for partial roof replacement at Holston Middle School and full roof replacement at Corrigan Elementary School.
Motion by Mr. McMillan, seconded by Mr. Norman. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10A was withdrawn. Item 10B, approve differentiated pay plan for the Knox County Schools for school year 2017-2018.
Motion by Mr. Norman, seconded by Ms. Roundtree. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Roundtree.
Item 10C, approve Knox County Schools Middle School zoning plan associated with construction of the new Gibbs and Hardin Valley Middle Schools.
Madam Chair, we have one speaker signed up for public forum regarding this agenda item. And just as a reminder, if you'll when you come to the podium, state your name and county of residence. It is Deborah Porter.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Porter, the president of the local branch NAACP, Post Office Box 27612, Knoxville, Tennessee. If you will just indulge me just for a moment, and let me just give you a scenario here of what I think is happening with rezoning, some good and maybe some not so good. But the NAACP wants the Knox County School Board to continue the rezoning process with the elementary and the high school. Scenario: a young girl, 5 years old, entering kindergarten at Dogwood Elementary School. Transportation is provided. However, her mother has to get her up at 5:30 a.m. in order for her to catch the bus at 7 a.m., in order for her to be there at 7:30 or 7:45 a.m. She misses the bus. Her mother does not have transportation to take her to school. Therefore, she misses a full day of school. Therefore, it is critical that the process continues. We want the best possible educational environment for all of our Knox County students. With that said, there is always room for improvement for our elementary and high school students. We want to see an initiative towards building new schools in communities that haven't seen a new school in over 40 years, i.e. Mechanicsville, Lonsdale, and a new high school with all the equipment and amenities and state-of-the-art amenities that schools have. Of course, as I said before, This is a step in the right direction, but we want our new superintendent to be the catalyst to begin the process of equity. There was a time when neighborhood schools were the norm and communities and children thrived. I am a product of those communities here in Knoxville. The Knoxville NAACP wants to see those healthy communities again, together for the common good for all students, parents, and teachers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that was the only speaker signed up for that item.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on item 10C from the board? Need a motion? There's no motion. Okay. Can I have a motion? Motion by Ms. Horn. Seconded by Ms. Etheridge. Any discussion from the board? Seeing none, then all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10D, discussion and possible action to surplus property located at Sam E. Hill Family Community Center.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one speaker signed up for public forum on this item as well. Mr. Rick Roach.
Good evening, everyone. The item states that you will consider possible action on the surplusing of property at Sammy Hill location. I would ask that you consider no action at this time until you get further input from the community. I'm basing this on things that have taken place in the last several decades, especially since Knox County has taken over the school system. Within the city limits of Knoxville, there has been pretty much an abandonment, especially of inner city school properties, and not a repurposing of those properties. And this would, to me, continue that trend. And I think if you make a decision to take no action at this time and make a commitment to get further community input on use of that property, I think it would be of a total beneficial nature for the community. But it is essential that you get community input before you take any action at all, and then you can go from there. Thank you.
That concludes
Ms.
the
Fugit,
speakers.
Okay. Ms. Fugit.
Thank you. In order to get a motion on the floor so that we can discuss, I move approval of the resolution that the law director attached and sent us about transferring the property, the lot. So I make that as a motion, and then I'd like to have discussion if I can get a second.
A second.
Okay, second by Ms. Horn. Ms. Fugit, you want to begin our discussion?
Yes, thank you. I just want to say again, for the record, first of all, I am sorry to board members that my comments asking for a legal document so that we had something to vote on got misconstrued and was put out in the press as though we as the board were having trouble with all this, and all of you got probably inundated with emails and phone calls, and for that I apologize. My only question was, we actually need something to vote on, and historically we get a resolution attached saying why we are surplusing the property. I also would like to say all we are doing is surplusing a lot because the county has asked us to, because the city asked them to do it, to work on a project in the Lonsdale community that is getting community input. This resolution further states that if they don't come to some consensus and the project does not move forward, we are asking that the property be transferred back to Knox County Schools. So I think that is about the best of all worlds that the Board of Education can do. If there is a greater project that can happen in the Lonsdale community that the city and the county work on with the community to create, and The holdup is that we need to surplus a lot so that they can actually have access to move forward. That's why I'm proposing that we adopt this resolution, understanding that if that does not follow through, we would like our property back.
Thank you. Ms. Owen?
I'm really glad you did bring it up Monday, because it has, it was sort of a catalyst for some discussion from some community members. And the thing that has been quite a red flag for me has been that the communication I've gotten from people who are in that area and who would be most impacted by it has been very, very negative. They have been very opposed when I've talked with folks who will be impacted by it. People who are much further away and reasonably wouldn't be impacted by it have been not only very, very supportive, but almost aggressively supportive. And that concerns me a bit. When you have a community that is not quite sure, and folks outside the community pushing really hard. And so that alone, for me, is reason to step back and kind of pause and take a look at things. The other thing that Monday's discussion did was give me, it had me look very closely at that map and at who owns all of the property in that area. And when I did that and looked at all of those parcels, what I see is over time surrounding Sam E. Hill School. And what that looks like to me is something that could eventually lead to maybe a charter school there. Since we already have a charter school with Emerald Academy that is a K through 5 school, K through 6. Well, we haven't added those other grades yet. The Sam E. Hill property, the school building, is slightly smaller and would make a reasonable building for a middle school standalone building. And so it concerns me that not only that I thought that when I saw it, but that a community member I had not talked to thought that same thing. And this is not a community member I have a lot of interaction with, and they came to me and said almost the exact same thing that I had thought. And so, you know, not only does that say maybe I'm just not crazy here, but it definitely looks like something we need to be really cognizant of, especially when we are concerned about taking care of the public's money in the best way possible. Because if we are looking at turning over property, and that property is going to be controlled by a non-public entity, then that's concerning. All of the documentation that we have had up till now has come from a non-public entity. But everything that we are saying talks about the city and the county. So it doesn't really look like the city and the county are going to end up controlling that property. And that, I'm really seeing some not that I'm necessarily opposed to it either. It's just that I'm seeing two very different versions of what's going on. And I'm not sure that I can support either version because I can't tell which one is really real.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just would like to ask a clarifying question of the law director. First, maybe to point out for folks that the resolution does state that the property being discussed is actually owned by Knox County. It's not owned by Knox County Schools. I know we sort of get into this discussion a lot. So my question for the law director is, should this resolution not be approved, is this something that the county then would be able to approve anyway? Because if they're technically the fee owner of the property.
They have.
Mr. Duper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Ms. Roundtree. As we talked about on Monday night, the way the county views property that is either owned or operated by the board, and the property that we're discussing, or that this board is discussing tonight, would fall under property that is owned by the county but operated by the board. So since the board operates it, the board has use of that property for as long as the board feels necessary for operating it for the benefit of the schools. So the process starts here. But then, as the resolution talks about, once this board surpluses a piece of property, then it goes to the county and county commission for that body to decide what happens next.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Etheridge, did you have any further questions, Ms. Roundtree?
I just wanted to follow up and thank Mr. Dupler for preparing this, but I do want people to understand while we are surplusing, that doesn't mean we are the actual owner. I think this is a very convoluted process, but at the end of the day, the county owns the property and we are operating it. Am I stating that correctly, Mr. Law Director? Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Etheridge?
Madam Chair, Mr. Duper, so the county has asked us to surplus it, is it pretty much? Is that how it gotten to us in order for us to surplus it in the first place? Because even though they own it and we're utilizing it, they have asked us to surplus it back to them so they can do something else with it.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Etheridge. Thank you, Madam Chair. To be honest, I didn't know all the details about this on Monday night either, and I expressed that, and I hope the board appreciates that. I worked with David Brace, and I see that he's here tonight on behalf of the city. So I think he can, I think he can give more insight to Ms. Etheridge's question. Should that be okay with Madam Chair?
Okay, yes, Mr. Brace, if you want to approach the podium.
Thank you very much. David Brace, City of Knoxville. I know City Council will give an address. I'll give my home address, 2208 Fisher Place over in Island Home. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and the board. The City of Knoxville was approached by Emerald Youth Foundation. Emerald Youth is a long-standing entity. The city works with a lot of nonprofits, Boys and Girls Club, Wesley House, Emerald Youth Foundation. Many of our services are augmented with partners that are nonprofits, so that's not an uncommon relationship, and with faith-based groups. And so the city was approached by Emerald Youth about a potential investment, a significant investment by their board, an $8 million investment, and they wanted to work in a neighborhood where there were disadvantaged youth, especially boys of color. And so Mayor Rogero was very interested in this opportunity. As you may have heard, just prior to this opportunity with Emerald Youth, the Change Center, which is located east, again, another partnership with a nonprofit that originated with a faith-based group, Chief Roush, Mayor Rogero, and others, had already been announced, and there was a fundraising effort. And at that time, there was some concern that, hey, why is this being located east? What about youth in Lonsdale, where we've had violence against youth, especially boys of color? And so this seemed to be a great opportunity. This is a piece of property located in a redevelopment area that was in place since 2005. That redevelopment area identified, and there's a copy of that plan, which I can get each of you, identified needs within that community, and the city has been working with the community on those needs. Over the last couple of years, and fairly recently, August of last year, the mayor was invited to Lonsdale. Pastor Joe Smith is here, he's in the back, to discuss concerns. And really some of the main concerns that came out of that meeting were sidewalks and infrastructure and lighting on Texas Avenue, youth-serving facilities, youth-serving operations, especially for middle and high school youth. And then really the third part of that was there were some concerns about a store that was a nuisance store that actually the city has since acquired. That was a location that KPD had many issues and the community was very concerned about. And so when we left that meeting, Emerald approached the mayor and the city about the same time with this opportunity. And so, again, a great opportunity, and the request was there's approximately an $8 million investment. They asked for the city to help move forward. Obviously, there are multiple legislative bodies, elected officials, school board, county commission, city council. Emerald has a 25-year track record, like many of the partners we work with. And so we move forward with that process. I will apologize to the board if the information that arrived Monday was inadequate. I was leading that charge. I'm very familiar with the city council process. Been doing that for 16 years. I'm less familiar with the school board and some of the interactions between a law director and an employee that's out of the law director's office with the school board. So that's on me. I'll take responsibility for that. I have worked with county law. I hope the information that's before you tonight is descriptive of the property and the project. I will say, Ms. Owen, that the city and Emerald Youth have reached out to many people. Emerald has met with over 300 individuals. Mayor Rogero had a meeting in Lonsdale at Lonsdale Elementary where there were over 75 individuals at that meeting. The mayor facilitated the meeting. The mayor is very conscious of the need to separate church and state. Not once have I heard any discussion about a charter school, and I'm more than willing, if we need to put that into a redevelopment agreement, that has nothing to do with that, if that makes the board feel comfortable. I've never heard that. This is about providing a facility that does three things. Provides an education kind of coffee house style learning center like you would see on a modern college campus for middle and high school age kids. It's a broad range, but that's where we know there's need. Recreational facilities. There's going to be 2 multi-purpose fields. The concept includes 2 multi-purpose fields. That could be soccer, flag football, lacrosse. A full gym, two full-size courts that can be 4 mini courts, an art room, and a concession area. I know there were concerns about the Lonsdale Homecoming. I know that the city is fully committed. We've always supported the Lonsdale Homecoming. We want that to continue to be a signature event, and if that organization wants to grow that event, we're going to be there to make that happen. I know that Emerald is committed to that. Mr. Steve Diggs is here, Mr. DuBose, Pastor Smith. There's a number of folks. So I do want this organization, this board, to know that the city has done we feel like we've reached out. We've had a public meeting. We have a fact sheet. We've been very open about this process. There's no hidden agenda. It really is about serving youth in Lonsdale. And to have an $8 million project where the city only has to leverage $1 million of our dollars are going to be infrastructure. It's going to be sidewalks and lighting. So imagine a partner like Emerald, fields and a gym and a learning center and an art room, infrastructure completely around this block. Sammy Hill School could utilize the gym for its students during the day. Improved parking. I think right now some of the parking at Sammy Hill is kind of a gravel lot, non-ADA accessible parking lot. So there's a lot of benefit, I think, to both the students of the school system, but more importantly, youth in Lonsdale. And I hope there's some comfort in the fact that this is just really the first step to getting an agreement. And so the next step would be for the city to sit down with the county law department, the county mayor's office, develop probably a memorandum of understanding. And I think the lawyers, I'm not a lawyer, but they'll determine what that instrument is. I would see an MOU. That would have to go before county commission. And then the city has to work a redevelopment agreement with the organization that would provide the youth-serving facility, and there's going to be a certain amount of time that has to be done. And we do that with redevelopment projects routinely. I know there's been some discussion about a commercial project on this site. The city actually acquired the city property, not the school system property, but the block of property owned by the city for blight remediation. There were a number of dilapidated homes and vacant lots. There was blight, some drug activity. It acquired that thinking it would be a commercial property. We did a request for a proposal. We received no market response. It was about the same time that the 5 Points market struggled and failed. And so what we found was the commercial corridors leading into neighborhoods are great places for commercial activity because a commercial business can catch multiple neighborhoods, but they don't always do so well right in the middle of a neighborhood. And so, again, I think we've got an opportunity right now. the discussions on this have been going on for many months, so we're not trying to make you feel rushed. But we are to the point where we've got an opportunity, and Emerald has donors that want to invest. But I've never heard charter school, and again, if there's a way for us to put that into an agreement, I think I'm more than willing to take that before county law and city law. So I've talked a little too much, so if there's questions, I'll answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Etheridge, did you have any questions for him?
No, not any questions for him. I know that when I first heard of this, I immediately had a meeting with Steve Diggs and Reverend Smith, because my concern is we're going to surplus this piece of property, and it's going to go to city and county, they're going to do their thing. And I just want to make sure that once this, if this comes to fruition, that the community has an opportunity to have access to the building.
Yes, ma'am.
That they also have the opportunity to be a part of what's going on in that building.
Yes, ma'am.
That they benefit from that building, not only because for the children, but for the community as well. I also talked to some people in the community. I said, it's good that they say these things, but when it comes to drawing up the paperwork, someone needs to be sitting there, understanding and making sure that the things that the community desire is a part of that commitment in writing. Because I said the mayor's not going to be the mayor forever, and Steve Diggs may not be here forever.
Yep.
So you need to have it in writing. So I know the community has a lot of concerns. I've talked to some people that they're for the bill. They actually think this is a great opportunity for the kids. They're just nervous about nonprofit coming in, and then everything looks good, but once it's implemented, they don't have access, and it's not their building, and so therefore they don't have anything to do with it. So I know a lot of these conversations came up in the last meeting. I think you have answered a lot of questions, but you still have some questions that they still need answers. And one of them is that homecoming celebration, because the street that you're going to block off is good for parking, but they also have stage. They also have exhibit vendors. They have a lot of things that go on. I think I talked to Mr. Diggs, and he said that they will be at the next homecoming so that you guys can see exactly what's going on and what they would need in order to continue that process, because that's very important to that community. I've been to several. It's a great activity, event, and it means a lot to that community. So I think that that's a concern, and if we can work through those issues, and then I believe that will help comfort some of the anxiety that the community is having. So like I said, we're just surplusing the lot.
Yep.
And if it doesn't work, we get our block, we get it back. But in the meantime, I as a board member am concerned about making sure that the community is taken care of and they're at ease with what's going on with the property and what's going to happen to better their community, as well as Sammy Hill. I know Sammy Hill is going to benefit from this, so I have a little bit of happiness with the fact that Sammy Hill may get some upgrades and some things out of this process as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fugit?
Ms. Warren hasn't
Ms.
spoken,
Warren.
so.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Fugit. I think that, it would be great if the school system could invest in that property. The fact is that would probably never actually happen. So I think that to turn away an $8 million gift to a community that sounds like they're willing to get community feedback and work with the community partners, I think would be a real tragedy, and also because of the fear of what could come before this board in the future in the form of a charter school or that kind of thing. I understand your concern, Ms. Owen, but I think that this is such a vibrant, wonderful gift for this community, and I intend to support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Warren. I was just going to hopefully end the conversation with a reminder that way back, this was city property when it was a city school system, and it didn't become Knox County schools till the city got out of the school business. So I just laugh about how our property is all titled so oddly and who bought it and all that kind of thing. And I too, the reason I am supporting this resolution is because if people can't come to an agreement, we're not in the business of negotiating what Emerald and the city do. The city wants to proceed with discussions, and they can't begin the discussions until they know they have access to this property. That's why I'm supporting that we surplus this property so that the community, Emerald, and the city can all negotiate in good faith with the county for something that will work. And again, we have the caveat that if that doesn't happen and the whole thing blows up, we would like our property back.
Okay. Ms. Owen?
I'm still a little unclear on who will actually own the property and who will actually control the property. And there are a lot of questions I think that we all have. So I would like to make a substitute motion to delay our vote for 30 days.
Second.
Okay, we have a substitute motion on the floor from Ms. Owen, seconded by Mr. Norman, that we delay this for 30 days. Any discussion on that, Ms. Roundtree?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If Mr. Brace wouldn't mind just to address if there's anything that is pressing that it needs to be voted on this evening. Thank you.
Yes, we need to move forward with a number of things. And I can't address, you talk about the ownership issue and the controlling of the property, and this is very common in a redevelopment area, is that will be worked out in an agreement that will be approved through an MOU with County Commission and an agreement before another legislative body, City Council. And so it's not uncommon for us, the city and the county would do this routinely where we do a redevelopment activity and the property with clawback provisions goes to an entity like an Emerald Youth or a group like Emerald Youth, a nonprofit, to operate for a certain number of years, let's say 15 years. That's what I would envision. 15 years, if they don't operate the facility and do these certain things, the city clawbacks that property. So hopefully I can answer a little bit of that question, but yes, we need to move forward with a number of things. One is negotiations, and it's hard to negotiate if you don't know what your property boundaries are. There's 3 months of, at least 3 to 6 months of civil engineering, Metropolitan Planning Commission, one lotting the property, surveys, potentially rezoning for the use specific. So there's at least 6 to 12 months of work before we even move forward with the project, and that doesn't include all of the other legislative bodies. So there's still plenty of opportunity, again, to vet this project, to have additional oversight through County Commission and City Council. And so I hope we get to the point where we're excited about an $8 to $10 million investment in Lonsdale. That's what I hope we get to. We've done significant outreach. The folks that I talk to in Lonsdale, are there folks against the project? Absolutely. But there are many, many people that are absolutely excited about this project. And so I think we also have to remember, and I can't speak to this because I'm representing the city, but there are private donors that are ready and interested in, invested in our urban neighborhoods. And when they see headlines in the paper and they see discontent, you know, they want to make sure they're making investments where people want those investments. And so I think there's concern there as well, and Mr. Diggs and others are here if you'd like to hear from them. So is there urgency? Yes, there's urgency to move forward. So yes, there is.
Thank you. We're discussing the substitute motion to delay this for 30 days. Ms. Owen, you turned your light off. You don't have anything else? Ms. Fugit?
Thank you. I was just going to say I can't support the delay because I don't know that in 30 days we're going to know any more about the issue about who ultimately owns it. And so I think I will vote in opposition to delay.
Okay. So we have the substitute motion that we're voting on. Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I will support the substitute motion, and it's primarily because we've got a lot of conflicting information, although David Brace did a great job of describing it. And I agree with the concept. I mean, conceptually, for this community, $8 million, this thing, it could be a wonderful thing. But we're trustees of the school system, and all school system property. And I'm hearing different things, especially in terms of what Ms. Dethridge shared and different concepts from the community. So just because of that, and it feels also from my perspective, just as the board has to act, it feels like this is being rushed on us. And if I'm being rushed about something that's as complicated as a surplusing of property, I've got to be a lot more comfortable with it, and I'm just not to that point yet. So, and then there's one other issue that we haven't mentioned, and that is for Sam E. Hill, I'm not sure what our long-term views or visions are for Sam E. Hill. And there may be some very significant things that could be very important to that community that would be negated by disposing of this property. I have no idea, but those are things that we haven't talked about. And so I think more talk, more discussion, absolutely might solidify opinion about what the city and county David Brace is proposing. So I'll be in support of the delay.
Ms. Dethridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am not in support of the delay. I have been out there talking to the community. They do have concerns, but they never said they never said stop the project. It's very beneficial for the kids in Lonsdale. It's very important that we keep our kids safe. We'll never figure out what we're going to do with Sammy Hill in 30 days. I talked to the principal. The principal is elated, to be honest with you, because she sees some potential for what could be happening that's positive for the school. Yes, there are some ants about some things going on in Lonsdale and about the project, but I know they work very diligently, and I have talked to several of them. They may have some concerns, but they don't want to stop an $8 million project. And for those that haven't been out there to talk to the community, haven't been out there to see what's going on, it's funny, they're going to be the ones going to dictate and determine whether we have a project, because they don't want to surplus property because what may happen, we don't know if it's going to be a charter school. I'm like, David, I've never heard of a charter school. I would like to just, if you can indulge me, have Pastor Smith come up and speak about this, please. About what the community and how he feels what's going on in that community at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Dethridge. And I was going to also, I see Steve Diggs and some other community members there. So if you can keep your remarks brief, but if you all would like to come up and address the board, perhaps before we vote on the substitute motion, that would be great.
My name is Joseph Smith, pastor New Friendship Church in Lonsdale, live across the street from public housing. This right here would be a great asset for the community. There's a lot of stuff going on. This is right here is not a fix for everything. But our children, when you shut down Beardsley High School, you took away some stuff. Then you came back and shut down Rural High School. You took away the community. There's a sense of community that I think the school board owes this Lonsdale community. There's a lot of crime, a lot of stuff going on. And this right here will add to. Now, I also submitted to all of you all some names of stakeholders in the community, over 250 stakeholders who is for this project. Plus, there's 7 churches in the community who pastors assigned that are for the project. Also, KIGMA, the Knoxville Interdenominational Churches around the city are supporting this. We believe this right here will help aid what some of the crime element, other elements in the whole city. So I challenge you to do not delay this. When I get drive-by shootings and young boys shot right in front of the church, and because there's nowhere to go, I challenge you tonight to make this move right now. Tomorrow it may be somebody else's child, but somehow or another we're fighting, we're putting everything else in it. We hope you make that vote today for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, do you want to speak to it briefly?
My name is Melvin Kyle. I live at 1504 Delaware. I live in the community. I invested in 2004. I also had 42 stitches in my back when I started the walking school bus. Our community let us down. It was only one parent there, and that was me. I walked the kids. I started out with 7 kids. Before the program was over, I had 30. I know what the kids want. We haven't talked to the kids. If y'all don't give us this, we may never get nothing. It would be woods and gangbangers everywhere. I want this. I'm going to fight it and keep fighting for my kids. That's what they are to me. Now, some people might oppose it, but do something in your community. Then I'll support you. Me and my wife woke up one morning. I said, hey, we don't do nothing for the kids. People talk about the kids. I took $200 out of my savings account. I'm going to be passing out pencils and paper. And I got Regions Bank to go with me and TVA. That's what I'm doing in my community. And I'll be dang if I'm going to let this project get out of Lonsdale when every other town is building. South Knoxville, East Knoxville got Chain Center. We have nothing but woods. When y'all leave today, just ride across South Knoxville. Go through Lonsdale and see what we got. People talk about the community, invest in the community.
Thank you. Okay. Steve, did you want to address the board? Are you okay? Okay. All right. So, yes. So we have Ms. Owen. Can we?
I have one question for David Brace very quickly. And to be clear, I'm not against this project. I was out there with Ms. Bounds and Ms. Dethridge and Superintendent Thomas when this was announced. So I am absolutely not opposed to it. I would like the conflicting information to be cleared up. That is what I'm asking for 30 days to do, is so that all of us can be very clear on what it is that we're actually voting on. And my question is pretty simple. Looking at the playground, the Sammy Hill playground, we talked about Monday some improved playground facilities.
Yes.
Who would be responsible for maintaining those playground facilities? Who would be responsible for the play structures and the mulch, et cetera, once those were installed?
So I think you're asking a question that's hard to answer right now because we don't have a redevelopment agreement or MOU with the county. What I envision, and again, I'm not an elected official, so I'm a public administrator. What I would envision is we do a collaborative improvement of that playground where it is used by the kids during the day like it is now, but it's better in that it's open to the community in the evenings so that where there's youth on the field, parents are walking around the block and getting exercise, their kids can be in a playground, an improved playground. So I don't know what that looks like, but I know that the city is committed to the infrastructure improvements around it and making that playground better. I had lunch today with one of the employees in Public Works that oftentimes does grants, and we're looking at a grant where we would team up with another local partner and try to invest $150,000 or $200,000 in that playground. We'd love to have an accessible, like an Ashley and Nicole Dream playground there. That's not going to be worked out until we can discuss that and commit to a project. And if I don't know what the parcel is to commit to the project, it's very difficult to have those next discussions. And so I do, if you'll indulge me for just a second, some of the concerns that you've heard over the last couple of days are concerns that have been continually discussed that we've tried to address. The city has through a public meeting, a well-attended public meeting that was publicly noticed. And I know Emerald has met with, and Mr. Diggs can talk about the number of individuals they met with. I think there will be folks, regardless of what public meetings and information that are presented, that will be against this project for any number of reasons. And so I don't know, until we start the discussions and have the agreement, I'm not sure if I'll be able to answer that clearly, but I know we're committed to those improvements.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, we have this, well, let me say first that I cannot support the substitute motion, and I do intend to support the resolution, having been out there like Ms. Owen and Ms. Dethridge and Superintendent Thomas and both mayors the day that it was unveiled. I was very excited for this community. If nothing else, the lighting alone was worth everything to me. So, plus all the other things that are going to be taking place and the improvements to the playground. So we're going to go ahead and take a roll call vote.
He can't vote. He can't vote. He left on the floor while the motion was on the floor.
He can't vote, Ms. Fugit said, because he left while the motion was on the floor. Okay, so we can go ahead then, if that invalidates his voting, we'll go ahead with a roll call vote, and we'll start over here with, I'm sorry, what?
Okay, and can you restate the motion?
Yes. The substitute motion was made by Ms. Owen to delay this for 30 days, the resolution for 30 days, and seconded by Mr. Norman, and that's what we're voting on now. So if it passes, there's no further going back to the original. If it fails, we'll go back to the original and vote on it. Is everybody clear on that? Okay, so since there's been so much discussion around this, I think it would be best if we took a roll call vote, if that's okay with the board. So Ms. Hill, can we start with Ms. Hill?
No.
This is no on delaying it, okay?
No, not to delay it.
No, not to delay it, okay.
Ms.
Yes.
Horn?
No.
Ms. Fugit?
No.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Roundtree?
No.
Ms. Dethridge? Ms. Bounds?
No.
That's 6 votes not to delay and 2 to delay.
Okay, so the motion to delay has failed, so we will go back to the original motion that was made by Ms. Fugit and seconded by Ms. Horn, and that was for passage of the resolution as it appears on the agenda tonight. So we'll do a roll call vote on that. This time we'll start with Ms. Dethridge in District 1.
Ms. Dethridge?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
No.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Fugit?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Ms. Roundtree?
Yes.
That's 7 votes for, 1 no, and Mr. McMillan's absent.
Okay, so the motion passes on the resolution for the Sammy Hill Family Community Center. Okay. And with that all being decided, I would like to take the liberty, this is the KCEA President, Lauren Hobson. This is her last official meeting with us tonight, as we talked about the other on Monday night's work session. So if she will approach the podium to make any closing remarks that she might want to addressing this board. And then after that, we'll do public forum.
I'll try to be pretty brief, but there are a few things I want to say. Almost 4 years ago, I started a really unintended journey with Knox County Schools by speaking at this very podium. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this podium. But very few people actually remember that it started 5 years ago when I came to address the board about some concerns with our evaluation system, which I am happy to say are now starting to be addressed by our school system. And I hope our evaluation system is going to get a much-needed overhaul. But I came to you in 2013 because I was really angry because a colleague and an excellent teacher, friend of mine, had been threatened. Her job had been threatened. She had been told that she could be fired if her test scores did not improve the next year. And she had gotten a conference of concern letter by someone who'd never been in her classroom, who had never even met her. And that's why I came here to talk to you all, and I'll get back to her in just a second. But I really want to say that I'm happy to say that that many of the teachers who followed me in speaking here and who were at times vilified have proven themselves to be valuable, effective teachers who are extremely knowledgeable about education issues both inside Knox County and out. For instance, Rob Taylor now works for the Department of Education in Tennessee as a special ed consultant. Christina Graham Jones, who was non-renewed for no reason, is now a quite successful, effective first grade teacher in Oak Ridge, and she's been the recipient of numerous grants for materials and equipment for her classroom. Dave Gorman, who is the president of SPEAK, is now going to be the upcoming vice president of Knox County Education Association, and just the other day, his new assistant principal at Cedar Bluff Middle was raving about his abilities both as a teacher and as a team builder with his 7th grade team. Karen Latis, who's a Spanish teacher who you might remember came and told you that an evaluator had told her to speak less Spanish in her Spanish class so they could understand what she was teaching so she could be evaluated. She also said that the rubric we use for evaluations, had a lot of great things on it, but like healthy ingredients for a recipe, there's lots of great things out there you might want to include in a meal, but if you put them all in one meal, you end up with slop in the kitchen sink. She is now the Knox County High School Teacher of the Year, and she is a finalist for the Tennessee State Teacher of the Year. I even want to recognize Board Member Roundtree, who earlier this year was criticized as being a little dramatic and maybe premature with her resolution to not include T&Ready scores in student grades and teacher evaluations. And what do you know? She was right. And I want to go back to my friend Amy for just a second, who Knox County wanted to fire 4 years ago. Her name is Amy Cox, and I hope that you remember that name because she was sitting before you on Monday night as one of the 4 teachers who had been named a SCORE Fellow for Knox County in the state of Tennessee. She's still the same teacher she was 4 years ago, and now she's being recognized for the teacher she's always been. So I just want you to remember as a body that just because opinions of teachers, or really anybody for that matter, may not be popular, it doesn't mean they're not right. But we have come a long way in Knox County with improving teacher morale. We still have a long way to go with respect for teachers as professional educators. And we still need to be showing respect at every level for a teacher's right to be a member of their professional association that advocates not just for them as teachers, but also for their students. And we also need to remember that it's our job to protect the rights of all of our students. As for me, I'm going to be back in the 2nd grade classroom at Halls Elementary with the students that I love. I'll still be watching, so and I'm still going to be advocating for public education. But I just want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for the time that you take every month to go through these issues and deliberate on them and put a lot of thought into them. And I'm glad to have worked with you the last 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hobson. And we're going to go to public forum now, but before we do, I will announce that we will be taking a recess midway through. We have a lot of people signed up tonight, so midway through, we'll be taking a recess and then resuming. So I think we've got around 18, so somewhere after the first 9, we'll take a recess and then resume. So, Ms. Roundtree.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as Madam Chair stated, we do have quite a few people signed up, so just a friendly reminder, you get 5 minutes. Make sure you state your name and your county of residence when you come up to the podium. Our first speaker this evening is Kendra Perry.
Hello, my name is Kendra Perry, and I live in Knox County. I signed up to speak today to give you suggestions on how to recruit and retain strong teachers. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I've spent 8 years as a teacher in Knox County. I teach honors and AP English at Halls High School and hold my students to high expectations. I've earned tenure and have been a level 4 or 5 teacher every year under the team evaluation system. I've been involved in too many leadership positions to tell you about in the time that I have today. I'm a good teacher, and I'm leaving Knox County when summer bridge is over. My decision to leave was one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make, but I wanted to share a teacher's perspective with you in hopes that things will improve for other teachers. I'm lucky enough to be at a school that has excellent administrators who are supportive of teachers and give us respect and opportunities to grow as teachers and leaders. Speaking with teachers at other schools, I've learned that many principals are not nearly as aware of the daily demands that teachers face. I can honestly say that Halls High School principals have made my decision to leave even more difficult. I've seen too many strong teachers leave because the amount of money and respect we receive isn't worth the hours and work we put in. We all know the impact a strong teacher can have on children, but we need to take better care of those teachers. Instead of investing in quality teachers is worth the resources in the long run. I know many of you board members are new to Knox County School Board and are very supportive of teachers. Many teachers, like myself, have been too busy with our teaching duties or too afraid to speak up in the past, so I want to provide a voice for them. Knox County is entering a new era of leadership, and I hope that you will be open to a teacher's perspective on how to improve conditions for a precious resource we have, teachers. The first thing I'd like to discuss is instructional time and RTI. RTI classes take away from instructional time. My school did not have enough staff members to teach all of the intervention and regular classes. Instead of 4 blocks that are 90 minutes each, my school had to change the schedule to create 4 classes that are 80 minutes each and a 5th skinny class that was 45 minutes for RTI. Cutting out 10 minutes of instructional time each day amounts to 50 minutes each week. 18 weeks per semester means we lost 900 minutes with each class. That's equivalent to 15 hours or 10 days worth of 90-minute class periods. Losing that much instructional time puts unnecessary pressure on teachers and students. One positive aspect of having a skinny class is that students are able to take an extra core class or elective. However, many of my AP students and fellow teachers felt that extra anxiety from the additional class. Both RTI and vocational classes require, by law, a lower teacher-student ratio than other classes. Please take that into account when you allocate staffing numbers in the future. I've seen my administrators agonize over how to fit all of the necessary classes into the master schedule and still follow the state requirements. I realize that RTI is a mandate from the state, but please find a way to pay for it because right now the extra burden is falling to the teachers. Another thing I'd like to discuss is in-service. If I'm being brutally honest, 90% of the countywide in-services I've attended have been a complete waste of time. In the 8 years I've been with Knox County, the standards have changed a couple of times, and we've spent many hours unpacking these standards. I am an intelligent person. My fellow teachers are intelligent people. Spending hour after hour comparing the differences between standards is demeaning. We are professionals who are smart enough to understand the standards. If new teachers or struggling teachers need a separate in-service, please do what you expect teachers to do and differentiate for your teachers. Let the solid veteran teachers work together on planning, grading, or sharing best practices. Don't insult us. Treat us with respect like the professionals we are. The last thing I'd like to talk about is money. Teachers who go above and beyond the minimum requirements should be fairly compensated for their work. Many teachers I know fulfill all of the required in-service hours before school starts in August. Throughout the year, principals and supervisors ask teachers to do extra work like rewriting county EOCs, presenting at in-service, grading credit recovery essays, or working on the STAR or advanced ed committees for accreditation. There are usually no stipends offered for these things. Instead, we are offered in-service hours. Everyone who offers in-service hours means well, but those hours are pointless for many teachers. Since the Apex Performance Incentive no longer exists, the hours are meaningless. You are asking professionals to work for free, and that does not convey that you value our hard work. All of those extras are important to the functioning of a school, but a jar of dirt would honestly be more valuable to me than extra in-service hours. Many of us will do the work because it's vital to giving students a good education, but I'm asking you to find a way to compensate teachers for the work they do. Perhaps consider giving a bonus in May to teachers who exceed the required amount of in-service hours. Please find a way to improve these things so Knox County will be able to recruit and retain strong teachers. Thank you.
Is Crystal Yamazaki.
My name is Crystal Yamazaki, and I live in Knox County. I'm here tonight to talk about the treatment of transgender students in Knox County schools, and to urge this board to allow transgender students to use the restrooms that correspond with their affirmed gender. When my daughter transitioned and I was informed that she would not be allowed to use the girls' restrooms at school, my first response was, why? I was told, we have to consider the comfort of all students. We have to respect all students. We have to make sure all students feel safe and loved. We have to do what's best for all students. But none of these excuses are a legitimate answer to my question. My daughter using the girls' restroom wouldn't prevent Knox County schools from accomplishing any of these goals. However, if my daughter is included in all students, then in barring her from using the girls' restroom, Knox County Schools is willfully and purposely choosing to fail in all of these goals. My daughter doesn't feel comfortable, respected, safe, or loved at school, and her well-being is being ignored by Knox County School staff and administration, despite clear evidence that she is suffering. About a year ago, my daughter was sexually assaulted by a male student, who I will refer to as M. I had already reported M for sexually harassing my daughter on the bus 2 days in a row. On the third day, M sat next to her on the bus again. He told her to show him her private parts. She said no. So he forced himself on her and pulled down her pants. He saw her panties, but she managed to get away from him before he could expose her private parts. My daughter felt ashamed and terrified. I immediately contacted the school. They responded by defending M and downplaying the incident. The school rejected my assertion that the assault had anything to do with my daughter's gender, and they denied that I had previously reported M for sexual harassment. I requested that M be expelled from the bus. The school refused. My husband and I now drive our daughter to and from school for her own safety. Being sexually assaulted has traumatized my daughter, but the school's egregious non-response to the assault, coupled with the restroom restrictions they continue to force on her, have compounded and prolonged her trauma. My daughter recently told me that she feels sad about her private parts. When I asked why, she responded, "Because someone might see it and think I'm a monster." I told her, "You're not a monster. You're beautiful. I love you." Then I asked, "When would anyone see your private parts?" And she said, "When I use the bathroom at school." I assured her that no one would see her private parts in the school restroom and asked her why she thought this might happen. Her response? "My teacher told me I'm not allowed to lock the door." For those who aren't familiar with my daughter's situation, allow me to give a brief account of her experiences. My daughter is not allowed to use the girls' restroom at school. This is the punishment she has been given for not fitting the mold of what Knox County Schools thinks a girl should be. She is segregated, ostracized, treated as undeserving of kindness, dignity, and respect. She is required to use the boys' restroom, where she would be harassed, perhaps assaulted, and where she is likely to encounter the male student who sexually assaulted her. Or if she doesn't wish to use the boys' restroom, and she doesn't, she must use a staff restroom where, purportedly for safety reasons, she isn't allowed to lock the door. Let me repeat that. A Knox County teacher has told a sexual assault victim that she isn't allowed to lock the restroom door. A student or teacher could inadvertently walk in at any moment and see her private parts, or someone could purposely follow her in and hurt her. She is convinced there are cameras in the restroom so that the principal can spy on her. She's afraid the school security officer is watching her. She's afraid she will get punished simply for using the restroom. She doesn't feel safe.
Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to conclude your comments since we have so many folks signed up out of the respect for everyone's time.
I would like to request one additional minute. I can finish in 30 seconds.
Go ahead.
Thank you. She doesn't feel safe. No wonder she's had so many accidents at school. She frequently comes home smelling like urine. She even soiled herself at school once. No one helped. No one contacted me to let me know it had happened. Did no one notice? Or was it just that no one cared? When I picked her up that day, the smell was obvious. I don't believe for a moment that no one noticed. My daughter feels like a monster because Knox County Schools is treating her like a monster. My daughter's not a monster. She's kind and smart and beautiful, both inside and out. If there is a monster here, it can only be you. And so I ask again, why?
Our next speaker is Courtney Shea.
My name is Courtney Shea. I live in Knox County. I'm speaking on behalf of Justice Knox. Justice Knox is an interfaith organization with 15-member congregations. There's a total of 20 congregations who participate in Justice Knox. There's approximately 10,000 congregants who attend those churches. Our congregation, I have spoken to you before on behalf of Justice Knox, on behalf especially advocating in favor of restorative practices. We think it's an important program that has proven to work. We had reviewed the changes that were proposed to school board policy that were published on the website, and Justice Knox School Board concurred with those, and we are in support of you making those changes to policy. Those changes will give additional tools and discretion to principals and teachers in addressing discipline in a manner that's consistent with best practices. We also reviewed the email that was sent to you by Stop School Pushout by Lance McCold, and Justice Knox also concurs with the additional comments which were made there. I think a clearer statement of policy in favor of restorative practices is important. In addition, we were especially concerned that there was a statement about in J193 about restorative practices being implemented after a suspension had been completed, and I think it makes more. It's pretty commonly agreed that restorative practices belong at the front end of when a discipline action occurs. But we concur with all of the comments which were sent in that email to you by Stop School Pushout. So Justice Knox did not see the amendments. I've tried to figure them out from the website. It looked like they added a little as practical or as possible, I think, is the amendments that were changed. But we were concerned with some of the comments that seemed to indicate that school board members are hesitant about implementing restorative practices. I remind you that the 2016 Disparities in Educational Outcome, which was adopted by the school board, also emphasizes the use of restorative practices, and we hope you will make these policy changes when they come up again next month. As a second matter, I want to mention Justice Knox is very concerned with how the implementation process is going forward. There have been pilot schools which are implementing restorative practices. We have asked for information on how those pilot schools are implementing it, what resources they have for implementing it, what training remains to be done. And we would like, it would help us in speaking with our congregations and educating our congregations to have this information. We have a meeting on June 12th, and we would especially like to be able to have some of that information, which we have previously requested before June 12th. If maybe, I don't know if the superintendent or someone could help us out with that, but that would do it. Again, we thank you for your interest. We hope you will move forward with the policy changes that are necessary to make restorative practices effective and a part of our school discipline process. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Joy Camacho. And if you'll just state your name and county.
I'm Joy Camacho, and I live in Knox County. I'm going to start off by reading a letter that a friend of mine wrote to the state of Alabama. Last week, a 13-year-old boy in Trussville, Alabama, took his own life after battling with depression and anxiety. Jay Griffin, a 7th grader at Trussville Middle School, was transgender. Jay's mother, Erin Georgia, said she began realizing her son was born in the wrong body halfway through the 6th grade. There was a transition from long hair, and he started dressing differently, she said. As Jay was struggling to express his own gender identity, he was unable to find the support he needed in his hometown of Trussville. He didn't feel validated or accepted in our community, his mother said. Although I did not know Jay or his family, I grieved over him after reading about his suicide. 10 years ago, I was a 13-year-old girl in Alabama coming to terms with the fact that I was bisexual. I realized I was attracted to other girls when I was as young as 6 years old, but then I denied it to myself and hid it from my family and friends for years. I could have been Jay and taken my own life, or I could have been Nick Hawkins, the bisexual boy who was murdered last year. But fortunately, I survived with only 24, and will turn 24 next month. And I have an obligation to speak up for those children and teens in Alabama who are struggling right now. But if I speak up, then I must speak the truth. And the truth is that the blood of Jay and other LGBTQ youth who took their lives is on the hands of Alabama. The pervasive transphobia and homophobia in Alabama is partly to blame for their deaths. A young transgender boy or bisexual girl growing up in Alabama hears one message, and that is they're abnormal, immoral, and a second-class citizen. When Alabama State Senator Phil Williams introduced a bill restricting the rights of transgender people to access public bathrooms, it sends a message to transgender teens like Jay that they aren't allowed in public. When Senator Williams cites concerns over the potential for crimes like voyeurism, exhibitionism, molestation, and assault and battery in bathrooms to support his bill, it wrongfully makes transgender people out to be sexual predators, when in fact transgender people are more likely to be harassed and assaulted in bathrooms. When Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed into law a bill that allows adoption agencies to refuse to place children into same-sex homes based on the agency's religious beliefs, it sends the message to LGBTQ teens that they can't dream of having a family someday. Hateful messages like these from Alabama have a real impact on the mental health of transgender teens in the state. It hurts these vulnerable youth who already have higher rates of depression, self-harm, and suicide than their cisgender peers. According to the Trevor Project, a 24-hour toll-free confidential suicide hotline for LGBTQ youth, studies show that nearly 40% of transgender adults reported having made a suicide attempt, and 92% of respondents reported having attempted suicide by the age of 25. Studies have linked high suicide rates in LGBTQ youth to public policies restricting bathroom access and criminalizing same-sex marriage. A 2016 article published in the Journal of Homosexuality linked the high suicide rates of transgender teens with the rise of bathroom restrictions in public schools. Although we can't bring Jay back, we can prevent the death of future LGBTQ youth in Alabama, and that's what he would have wanted us to do. We can start by changing the transphobic and homophobic rhetoric in Alabama when talking about issues impacting the LGBTQ community. Transgender teens like Jay aren't sexual predators or mentally disturbed. They're kids who are coming to age and need to be supported through their journey by the adults in their life. Jay's mother was right. When it comes down to it, our children just need to be loved and accepted. You may be wondering why I'm reading an open letter to Alabama to the Knox County School Board. What does it have to do with us? It has everything to do with us. We too are telling our children they don't belong in public and that there's something unacceptable about them. Like Amanda, I could have been Jay. As a 13-year-old who had just moved to Tennessee and was recognizing my own orientation and trying to understand my own gender issues, I received these same messages over and over again in our public schools. I can tell you the thought of suicide is one that crossed my mind more times than I'm comfortable admitting. I survived, and now I feel I have a responsibility to speak out for the rest of the Jays in the world, more specifically, the Jays here in Knox County. I graduated high school over 15 years ago. It's really troubling to see that our kids are facing the same issues that I and others have experienced while in school. In 15 years, the people who have been making decisions that weigh heavily on our children's lives have not realized that acceptance is what they need the most. Not just the straight cisgender children, but all of them. This is not about catering to a few kids. This is about saving lives.
Our next speaker is Lindsay Burchett.
Lindsay Burchett, Knox County. I'll be reading a statement from a sophomore in the Knox County school system. Dear School Board, there are many issues with how the school treats transgender and LGBTQIA students, and I will be listing just a few that desperately need to be addressed. For starters, bathrooms. This suddenly controversial topic desperately needs a solution. The current system is not working. Having to get up and walk over to a teacher in the middle of class to ask for a key to the staff bathroom is a dead giveaway and will potentially out a trans person to the whole class. Not to mention, the student could be questioned by staff while entering the bathroom because teachers or janitors assume they're up to something. Secondly, there is a desperate need to educate the public about transgender people. Ignorance scares the general population more and leads to wild assumptions with more bullying situations. If we can open up minds and show them that this isn't taboo and that this isn't some taboo that should be shunned and kept hidden, then we can make some real progress with cutting down the bullying. Lastly, there needs to be broader teaching for sex ed. I don't believe I personally learned anything from the past 2 sex ed classes that I had to endure. All that was presented was diseases you contract, abstinence making you a better person, and how you can still have abstinence as your end goal without leaving us ignorant. Do you believe that giving us honest and accurate information would leave you with no way to prevent teenagers from engaging in activities? If so, then perhaps your end goal should be reevaluated. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Shawnee Rios.
Hello, my name is Shawnee Rios and I live in Knox County. Last month, a transgender first grader in Knox County schools asked if she could read the book I Am Jazz to her classmates because she wanted to share her true self with her friends. Her school said no. She was forbidden from sharing the book in class and effectively prevented from coming out to her friends. Today, I will be reading I Am Jazz to all of you on behalf of that first grader, because the first step in meeting the needs of transgender students is learning what it means to be transgender. I am Jazz. For as long as I can remember, my favorite color has been pink. My second favorite color is silver, and my third favorite color is green. Here are some of my other favorite things: dancing, singing, backflips, drawing, soccer, swimming, makeup, and pretending I'm a pop star. Most of all, I love mermaids. Sometimes they even wear a mermaid tail in the pool. My best friends are Samantha and Casey. We always have fun together. We like high heels and princess gowns or cartwheels and trampolines. But I'm not exactly like Samantha and Casey. I have a girl brain but a boy body. This is called transgender, and I was born this way. When I was very little and my mom would say, "You're such a good boy," I would say, "No, Mom, a good girl." At first, my family was confused. They'd always thought of me as a boy. As I got a little older, I hardly ever played with trucks or tools or superheroes, only princesses and mermaid costumes. My brothers told me that this was girl stuff, and I kept right on playing. My sister says I was always talking to her about my girl thoughts and my girl dreams and how one day I would be a beautiful lady. She would giggle and say, "You're a funny kid." Sometimes my parents let me wear my sister's dresses around the house, but whenever we went out, I had to put on my boy clothes again. This made me mad. Still, I never gave up trying to convince them. Pretending I was a boy felt like telling a lie. Then, one amazing day, everything changed. Mom and Dad took me to meet a new doctor who asked me lots and lots of questions. Afterward, the doctor spoke to my parents, and I heard the word transgender for the very first time. That night, at bedtime, my parents both hugged me and said, "We understand now. Be who you are. We love you no matter what." This made me smile and smile and smile. Mom and Dad told me I could start wearing girl clothes to school and growing my hair long. They even let me change my name to Jazz. Being Jazz felt so much more like being me. Mom said that being Jazz would make me different from the other kids at school, but that being different is okay. What's important, she said, is that I'm happy with who I am. Being Jazz caused some other people confusion too, like the teachers at school. At the beginning of the year, they wanted me to use the boys' bathroom and play on the boys' team in gym class, but that didn't feel normal to me at all. I was so happy when the teachers changed their minds. I can't imagine not playing on the same team as Cassie and Samantha. Even today, there are kids who tease me or call me a boy name or ignore me altogether. This makes me feel crummy. Then I remember the kids at school who get to know me usually want to be my friend. They say I'm one of the nicest girls at school. I don't mind being different. Different is special. I think what matters most is what a person is like inside. And inside, I am happy, I am having fun, I am proud, I am Jazz. Just like Jazz, the transgender students in Knox County schools deserve to be treated as the girls and boys they know themselves to be. I urge this board to educate yourselves on what it means to be transgender, to prioritize the needs of transgender students, and to allow transgender students to use the restrooms that match their gender identity. Thank you.
Speaker is Adam Hughes.
Thank you to the Board of Education for the opportunity to speak. Tonight, you've heard from many people, parents, teachers, students, taxpayers, Knox County residents who take an interest in the future of our education policy. But while some of these labels do apply to me, I speak tonight primarily as a soccer fan. Some of you may not know this, but Knox County has a burgeoning soccer culture. Just look at the number of organized games or pickup games going on throughout the city at any given time and throughout the county. But this also makes me think about who gets to participate fairly in this sport that means so much to me. And in that light, I say that the board must end school policies that discriminate against transgender students and keep them from enjoying the benefits of playing sports. All athletes have formative memories of their locker rooms, and these memories can be uncomfortable or even traumatic. While some of us remember our school locker rooms fondly as a site for friendly bonding, others instead recall mockery, hazing, and violence. Toward the end of last year, we had a national discussion about how some shameful words and behaviors can be excused as, quote, locker room talk. Why do locker rooms have this reputation? The locker room can be a place for language and behaviors that have no place within a school. For students whose gender identity doesn't match their assigned locker room, it becomes much worse. This is why the Knox County Board of Education must mandate that all schools allow transgender students to use the locker rooms and bathrooms consistent with their gender expression. We all know that playing sports together can overcome major differences and bring young people together as a team. Why can't we use this to challenge stereotypes and break down barriers, to let trans students feel comfortable with themselves, and to help their peers understand that all students, regardless of their gender identity, are worthy of respect? We all want what's best for our amazing Knox County students in the classroom and on the field. We'll only get there when every student is allowed to compete, to socialize, to learn, and to succeed in a way that makes them feel welcome. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Leticia Flores.
Good evening. My name is Leticia Flores, and I live and work in Knox County. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and the Tennessee Equality Project's committee chair for Knox County. TEP is dedicated to providing educational programs to advance the values of equality and inclusion for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. I first want to thank everyone on the Knox County School Board for your service and your dedication to the county's elementary, middle, and high school students. I meet these students as a faculty member in our local university, and I have seen much of the good work that the schools have done in forming the minds of our youth. I'm here today to remind you of and to support you in your duty to support all of Knox County students. Schools can make or break a child. They can provide a home for learning and personal development, or they can become battlefields where dreams die and personal potential is squashed. A recent show called 13 Reasons Why, I'm sure you've heard of it, details in graphic and brutally honest detail how children and teens can be bullied, alienated, and driven to desperation because of ignorance, stigma, fear, and shame around issues of sexuality and gender. What is more striking than the bad behavior of the students in the show is the failure of the adults, the parents and the school authorities, to notice, address, and correct the behaviors they saw and heard about. Even for those adults who tried, the education system failed to provide adequate support for their efforts. There was a systemic and individual failure to build and nurture a culture of respect, safety, and acceptance. This failure allowed bullying, casual instances of cruelty, and even physical and sexual assault to continue against the vulnerable. While the show is clearly fiction, it still has many lessons for real life. Kids imitate the adults in their life: parents, teachers, politicians, sports heroes, and other authority figures. If adults behave badly, so will kids. Schools have the best chance at building a society whose members protect and respect each other, providing classrooms, lunchrooms, and restrooms that promote respect and safety towards all students may seem like a small gesture, but it's the collection of small gestures that make up a character of a school and of a society. You have an opportunity to be the leaders that all students need. I hope you continue to take that responsibility seriously so that you can help create the leaders of the future that we all need. By creating and sustaining a welcoming and inclusive environment for students with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities, you create and sustain a welcoming and inclusive environment for all. States which have adopted anti-transgender bathroom policies and other anti-LGBT policies communicate that these children, our children, are less than and not deserving of our care and respect. Across the nation, LGBT students are under attack, and the results are devastating. Instances of bullying and discrimination lead to depression, anxiety, and worse. If school authorities promote discrimination against LGBT students, then the students will follow your lead. I know Knox County is better than that. Thank you today for your time, and thank you in advance for your efforts to promote equal treatment and equal access for LGBT youth.
Thank you. We're about halfway through with public forum, so we're going to take, let's meet back in here at 7:30, and we'll resume public forum. take their seats. We'll resume from recess.
And while everybody's coming back to their seat, I'll go ahead and let the next speaker get ready. It is Jennifer Beeler.
My name is Jennifer Beeler, and I'm the proud parent of a transgender child who has attended Knox County schools since kindergarten and is a rising freshman for the 2017-2018 school year. I am here today to ask you to make changes to your policies regarding the treatment of LGBTQ students. I have taken the time to look at other school systems across the country's policies on some of the issues we have faced, and will be happy to provide you with the websites used in my excerpts today. My first is from the New York City Department of Education. It's dated March 1st, 2017. It's on transgender and gender nonconforming student guidelines. There's a quote that says, "If we lack respect for one group, then there is a tendency for that attitude to spread. It becomes infectious, and no one becomes safe from the ravages of prejudice." Educators play an essential role in creating a supportive school culture and advocating for the well-being of students. It is important for school staff, students, and parents to be aware that transgender and gender nonconforming students may be at higher risk for peer ostracism, victimization, and bullying because of bias and/or the possibility of misunderstanding and lack of knowledge about their lives. Schools must be proactive in creating a school culture that respects and values all students and fosters understanding of gender identity and expression within the school community. Supporting transgender or transitioning students. Schools have a unique and powerful opportunity to support transgender students, including those going through a gender transition, while providing education to the entire school community. Regardless of how a student transitions or expresses their gender identity, all students have the right to their gender identity recognized and respected by their school community. Names and pronouns. Every student is entitled to be addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to the student's gender identity that is consistently asserted at school. Students are not required to obtain parental consent or court-ordered name and/or gender changes as a prerequisite to being addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to their gender identity. Teachers and other school staff should be made aware of and honor a student's request to be referred to by the name and gender that corresponds to their gender identity. It is important to note that for students who are gender nonconforming or who do not prescribe to the gender binary, that they may prefer gender-neutral pronouns. Restroom and locker room accessibility. Transgender and gender nonconforming students must be provided to access facilities, restrooms, locker rooms, or changing rooms consistent with their gender identity consistently asserted at school. A transgender student may not be required to use a facility that conflicts with the student's gender identity consistently asserted at school. A student whose gender identity is fluid should work with their school to facilitate restroom and locker room access that affirms their identity. Schools must provide reasonable alternative arrangements for any student who expresses a need or desire for increased privacy. Reasonable alternative arrangements may include a single occupancy restroom, use of a private area, or separate changing schedule. Any alternative arrangement should be provided in a non-stigmatizing way and in a manner that protects the student's ability to keep their transgender status confidential. Alternative accommodations must be made available to students who request them, but may never be forced upon students. I have some statistics from the Gender Spectrum website. It's on pretty much their page of the transgender students in school bathrooms. If you just Google it, you can easily find it. Having support at school and acknowledging a student's right to use the bathroom consistent with their gender identity is critical. A negative school experience not only hinders a transgender student's academic achievement and growth, but can also interfere with their long-term health and well-being. 75.1% of transgender students feel unsafe at school because of their gender expression. 63.4% of transgender students reported avoiding bathrooms, and 41% of gender or gender nonconforming people have attempted suicide. I hope that you will take the time to maybe look over some of these sites and see that it is being done across the country, and I hope that you will start implementing them in Knox County schools for the best interests of our kids. Your motto does say excellence for all.
Our next speaker is Lee Kessler. Kiesler.
My name is Levi Ian Kiesler, and I, of course, live in Knox County. I'm here to discuss the discrimination and backlash I've received for being both gay and trans while attending a Knox County school. In my 7th grade year, I had a teacher who was very openly homophobic, transphobic, and racist, and everyone acknowledged it. He still received praise. Towards the end of the year, this teacher made a statement comparing bestiality to homosexuality. Quote, "With recent marriage laws in mind, donkeys will be able to marry humans soon." End of quote. Once I started speaking up about this and openly telling him that what he said was wrong, he told me that if I disagreed with his opinions, I should leave the classroom. So I left, and I reported him, yet he received no repercussions at all. He just stopped teaching for the rest of the year and just kept spouting views that were not related to the standards that were supposed to be taught. The next thing that popped up was in 8th grade. I came out as, a male-identifying transgender person in my 8th grade year. I emailed all my, teachers, I emailed all my related arts teachers, I emailed basically the whole school to make sure everybody got the memo. I talked to other students, and I spread the word and basically socially transitioned in a few weeks. One of my teachers repeatedly misgendered me and dead named me on purpose, and when I said something in class, this teacher would ridicule me and tell me that I should not be talking about it in class. One day, I got so tired of it that I confronted her after class. I took the time, and I was actually late for my next class because I talked to her about this. And she claimed that she could call me whatever name she wanted to. So she could be over here calling me John, and it wouldn't matter to her. I left to my next class, and halfway through that class, I was called out of that class by this teacher and told that what I did was extremely disrespectful, as if she had not been disrespecting me before. She also gathered 3 other teachers, 3 of them on the other side of the hallway, not even on that hallway, who were not previously involved. I was forced to use the faculty bathroom, which did not bother me until I realized that that was constantly locked. I asked my teachers for a key, they said no. I asked them if I could use the bathroom or if they could unlock it, and they said they didn't have time. The only bathroom that was open was on the other side of the school in the 6th grade hallway, and I was an 8th grader. This was a good 100 feet across the school, and I needed a pass and an escort that so many teachers were not willing to give me. When I there were a few students who sexually harassed me. They verbally harassed me. They made fun of me. They spit on my locker. They disrespected the only thing I had in school that was rightfully mine, because apparently my identity doesn't even belong to me. I reported these students, and do you know what I was told? I was told they could not do anything because it is their beliefs. Their beliefs is discrimination, and I find it very, very disrespectful, and it makes me so angry that discrimination is now just people's beliefs. So they can call me, mind my language and all that, a tranny or a faggot, or spit at my feet because that happened, and it is their beliefs, and they cannot be censored. I explained what happened with the teacher, and it was her beliefs too. She didn't get anything. She wasn't told anything because she had taught for 43 years. She was a valued enough teacher that suddenly her talking down to me and treating me less than human and treating me differently than other students, cisgender students, may I add. And I found that the more I spoke up about it, the more they tried to silence me. All I want from you guys, actually I demand it, is for you to figure out, listen, I demand for you to take LGBTQ students into mind when making anti-bullying rules. And actually consider actual discrimination, a violation of my rights. I request more time. Is not just someone's beliefs, because I assume they were talking about religious beliefs. The religion I practice used to say we could sacrifice goats, but we don't do it anymore. So, I request also that students should be addressed with the right name, pronouns, no matter what their legal documents say. I also request that they can use the right bathroom or locker room.
Okay, I'm going to give you 20 seconds to wrap up.
Despite what is their assigned sex. You know what, I thought about killing myself at the age of 10 when I realized I was gay. I cried because people at school were constantly calling me a dyke because I showed affection for another girl who called me one too. When I came out as trans, I knew I was going to be even more disrespected, but I did not expect it from the school, the only place that I find is my safe haven. Thank you.
Speaker is Jack Knoxville. We still have quite a few speakers left, so if everyone would just be mindful of the folks speaking next.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Knoxville, and I'm a 38-year-old man who was misdiagnosed at birth as female. I'm the founder of the Trans Empowerment Project, the vice president of an upcoming chapter of PFLAG, a Wall of Tolerance Award recipient, and currently running for Knoxville City Council District 4. I'm originally from New York, but spent most of my childhood in South Carolina. The household that I grew up in was anything but kind, which of course really stifled my growth. I didn't have the type of support that my friends did. There was no one willing to drive me to sports events, tryouts for anything, or even to come watch me when I actually did make it into plays and musicals. In fact, most of the time, my stepmother would find reasons to ground me so that she could avoid these responsibilities. Part of her issue with me was that I didn't like the pretty pink dresses that she thought I should. The consequences for not wearing what was expected were anything from shaming to grounding to physical beatings, emotionally all of which took its toll on me until well into my 30s. At school, it was no different. I wasn't like the other girls. Even when I would try to force myself into the costumes as society wanted me to wear, it was apparent to my peers that I was awkward and uncomfortable, which of course led to my inability to excel as much as I would have, both socially and academically. The pressure of not feeling like I would ever be allowed to be myself almost killed me. By the age of 10, I experienced my first struggle with suicidal thoughts while on a school bus coming home from a field trip. I was already tired of feeling like an outsider on this planet. I just couldn't take it anymore, and I wasn't sure that I would ever feel like I would find a place of belonging. Puberty was my body's betrayal to my spirit and made me feel like everything was constantly working against me. The hopelessness and despair that I felt and have felt since are something that I wish no one else would ever have to experience. By the time I was a teenager, I spent more days romanticizing about death than I did living my life. My feelings of alienation were only worsened by activities where boys and girls were separated as I was forced into the female box, especially because the word transgender wasn't something that I had heard of or knew about until I was much older. Luckily for today's youth, this is not the case. We know now that a great deal of what I experience emotionally is what a lot of trans youth are experiencing, even when they come from supportive homes. The alienation, isolation, fear of rejection, suicidal thoughts, etc. are real and forcing students to be othered, and it only makes things worse. While we can't go back in time and fix my childhood, you, the school board, have a chance to positively impact and fix the childhood of many of our youth by putting an end to the way that transgender students are currently being treated. Unfortunately, the message that is being communicated by the school board at this time is one of separate but equal, which was overturned in the Supreme Court case of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. The original doctrine stated that separate public facilities of equal quality did not violate the protection clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, which read that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any persons of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. In Brown versus the Board of Education, Linda Brown was an 8-year-old black child who had to cross Topeka, Kansas to attend grade school, while her white friends were able to attend classes at a public school just a few blocks away. The Topeka school system was segregated on the basis of race, and under the separate but equal doctrine, this arrangement was acceptable and legal. Linda's parents sued in federal district court on the basis that separate facilities for blacks were inherently unequal. The lower courts agreed with the school system that even if the facilities were equal, that the child was being treated equally with whites as prescribed by the 14th Amendment. The Browns and other families and other school systems appealed to the Supreme Court that even facilities that were physically equal did not take into account intangible factors, and that segregation itself has a deleterious effect on the education of black children. Those intangible factors included, but in no way were limited to, the deterioration to the child's psyche, which is the reason that we're here today. The mental and physical health of trans students in our schools is deteriorating, and the people who were elected into office by their parents and the parents of the rest of the students are not protecting them as they should. There are multiple organizations that are being represented in this audience today, and all of which are volunteering to help. The Trans Empowerment Project itself is working to facilitate educational workshops and resources to help educate the community as well as the faculty within the school district and any other school district that's interested. All you need to do is reach out to us. And above all else, I hope that you'll understand the seriousness of this issue and consider your impact on the lives of each and every one of these kids and their family members. And to be honest with you, it's really ironic that there's such a rush to push forward a religious institution's presence in our schools, yet this board is dragging their feet to protect the trans children of Knox County. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mark Buckley.
My name is Mark Buckley, and I live and work in Knox County. I'm also an adult transgender male who gave birth in Knox County. And I'm here to discuss transgender inclusivity in Knox County schools and to speak for trans youth who cannot speak for themselves. I've been personally injured by the often blatant disrespect for this issue, ranging from multiple kidney infections because I was not allowed to use the boys' bathroom as a student, and being stabbed and maced for attempting to use the women's restroom because of this policy. I'm not a sexual predator, and there's nothing wrong with me because I'm transgender. After four failed suicide attempts related to society's attitude towards myself as a trans male, I finally started to understand that there's nothing wrong with me. That I'm standing here today for those who are only in this room in spirit, for those whose attempts did not fail. To put this issue into the simplest perspective, this isn't an issue of guys wanting to be in girls' bathrooms or vice versa. This comes down to the issue of not allowing businesses, in this case specifically the school system of Knox County, to discriminate against its students. The heart of the issue, not simply stopping at compassion, but it involves the core issue that should be number one in the mind of this board, which is education. Education rather than ignorance about what it means to be transgender. Education rather than ignorance about respect of our students' personal sense of being, of individuality, but it goes so much deeper than that. Using the correct bathroom is exactly what our transgender students are trying to do here. It is my understanding that this board stands behind a strict zero-tolerance policy when it comes to bullying and discrimination, and by refusing to allow transgender students to use a restroom that they identify with is very contradictory to that zero tolerance policy and puts you in the position of being the bullies that you are defending. This is not an issue of students wanting to use the wrong bathroom. The fact of the matter is the transgender students are asking for validation of their identity by being allowed the usage of the most basic of public services that they are entitled to simply by existing and being human, which we are. And such a denial would only be considered a violation of not only our civil rights, but a violation of our most basic human rights. And as a transgender resident of Knox County with a daughter who will be raised in the school system, I plead this board to be on the right side of history as a catalyst to equality. I can sit up here with a script all day and talk to you about transgender equality, but what it comes down to, it's not about what is written on paper. It's not about what's written in the laws. It's about the people that are standing before you today. And how many transgender people are not standing here today because they can't be, whether they're not out to their families, they're not out at school because they're too afraid to be, or because they already took their own lives because they were afraid of being in a position where someone that is a human being doesn't have access to a very basic public service that all of us have used 1,000 times since this morning. And having to plan out where you're going based on where is there a gender-neutral bathroom, or how long am I going to be there? Will I be able to get home in time to use my own bathroom? Just having to have those thoughts on a regular basis are ridiculous. And it is not something that should be enforced by the people of this board. The people of this board should be preaching education. There is a zero tolerance policy, not only in this board, but in the Constitution for discrimination. And by not allowing trans students to use the correct bathroom that they are most comfortable with, that's a violation of the Constitution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lindsay Wilson.
My name is Lindsay Wilson, and I live in Knox County. I know it's getting late. Everybody's getting tired. I'm only going to take a couple minutes. I kind of want to piggyback off of what Jack and Levi spoke about, just to the humanity behind the label transgender. I'd like to be a little candid for a moment and just mention how very nervous I was leading up to this. Speaking publicly on this topic in such a forum as this had me pacing the floors. And I know that conversations like this, all of you being part of conversations like this and the decisions that you will make later, will send ripples through all of the people that we know in our social, familial, and political circles who maybe just don't know the truth about transgender issues. It can be scary to talk about heavy things, and this is most certainly a heavy topic. The word transgender is spoken almost in a hush by so many people who simply know the word and label but cannot see a human face behind it. I'm here, like so many others, to add visibility and humanity to the word. I'd like for you to imagine something for me. Imagine that your child has been misdiagnosed. Imagine that you took your child to a medical practitioner who you know and trust. This doctor told you something about your child, even gave you physical evidence, and you accepted it. Why wouldn't you, right? So now your child has this diagnosis, this label. Now imagine that this label somehow made your child feel ostracized. People said things like, "No cancer patients here. People with diabetes must use that line," or "I don't want my child sharing a bathroom with someone who has lupus." Misdiagnoses can and do happen every day, and labels can be so dangerous. This is exactly what happened to my child. At birth, the doctor handed me my sweet little baby and said, "It's a boy." He showed me plenty of physical evidence, and I believed him. Why wouldn't I, right? It's a boy. That was a misdiagnosis. For years, my child thought that something was wrong with them because of that misdiagnosis, until finally, my child looked up at me and in a still, small voice said, "I'm a girl. I just know it." Her doctors and therapists agree with her. Nothing is wrong with her. She's a happy, healthy girl who, through no fault of her own, was simply misdiagnosed. Living for the years that she did, thinking that something was wrong with her, not understanding why her body and the label the doctor had given didn't match what she knew to be true about herself, because of a misdiagnosis that, again, was in no way her fault or choice. That was punishment enough. Children like her do not deserve to be further ostracized because of a simple misdiagnosis. I ask that you look at the humanity, the faces behind the label when you consider how to approach transgender children in your schools. I ask that you not continue to single out and punish children like ours. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Persephone Webb.
Good evening. My name is Persephone Webb, and I am a resident of Knox County. I am here again to represent our transgender youth as the Vice President of the Trans Empowerment Project Knoxville, the Vice President of the Foothills LGBT Center, and a Director for PFLAG Maryville. As a transgender woman, I know firsthand the horrors of growing up in a school system that I could not trust. For many of us, that lack of support even extends into the home with unsupportive parents. By the time I was in 4th grade, it became quite apparent that I could not trust anyone in my school or my home. My affinity for things that were deemed girly or pretending to be my favorite characters during recess made me an easy target for ridicule and even physical bullying. This was never taken seriously and was even encouraged because boys should not be the way I am. It was at this time that I basically shut down mentally and started building a false persona around what I was supposed to be. This also coincided with a dramatic fall in my grades and attendance. Bathrooms were a problem for me as well. I lost my place. I would do absolutely everything in my power to avoid public restrooms, even at a young age. There were times when I would have accidents and never tell anyone. Things became even worse for me when it became a requirement to change for gym class. I never felt I belonged in the boys' restroom or locker room. My only way around this was to wear gym shorts under my pants and hope I got the spot on the bench closest to the exit. I would fake illnesses often just so I didn't have to deal with the panic-inducing anxiety of going to school. I eventually dropped out of high school and got my GED. Thoughts of suicide were constantly flowing through my head. It was not until 1 year ago that I got the courage to come out privately to my wife and then subsequently to my employer, friends, and family. Fear paralyzed me my entire life. Fear of losing my job, fear of losing everyone I loved. After coming out, I lost most of my family, including both of my parents and siblings. I lost my childhood. I lost nearly all of the years leading up to this point in my life. That is why I am here today. I do not want anyone to suffer like I did. No one should have to hide who they are. The one place that these kids should always be safe is their school. Every teacher, coach, administrator should be educated on transgender issues and learn to foster an affirming environment for everyone, even the most marginalized of us. Children learn very rapidly whom they can trust and be themselves around. In many cases, for trans youth, the only adults they encounter they can trust will be in a school environment. A single supportive teacher that bends the rules and policies to protect a student can only go so far when there are not clear policies coming from the top down. It is very difficult for a student to succeed academically or build a healthy social life when the system itself makes them an outcast by default. And yes, that is exactly what this board is doing by telling trans children they are not allowed to use the restroom that corresponds to their gender or participate in gender-appropriate sports and clubs. You are setting the example for the entire student body to treat them differently and that they do not belong in the spaces that correspond to their gender. The psychological effects of this are absolutely devastating. It is hard enough to exist in this world as a transgender adult And these policies are setting these children up for a life of hardship and mental health issues before they even have a chance. This is unspeakably cruel and unjustifiable. There are teachers in the system that do want to be supportive, and several have come to me directly asking for advice on how to make some of their transgender students more comfortable within their limited power. Why has nobody on this board reached out to the community for advice? We are not going to suddenly vanish from existence because we are ignored. After the last meeting, the only thing that was said was a blatant lie to the media about following a supposed law on the books. There is no such law. This board has the power to enact policy that is supportive and affirming of transgender students and is refusing to act. This could all be solved quite easily. Model policies for the treatment of transgender youth are readily available. My organizations can help this board construct policies that will help transgender students rather than hurt them. I urge you to prioritize the well-being of transgender students. Please work with us to make school a safe and supportive environment for transgender students. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Zoe Maxwell.
Hello, I am Zoe Maxwell and I live in Knox County. I am 16 and constantly suffering with the persona that is being forced onto me and others like me. From a young age, children are expected to fall in line with gender norms for the gender they were assigned at birth. Many children, myself included, didn't fit in with these stereotypes. I was told, you are a boy, therefore you like these things and not these things. I grew up wanting to play with dolls, but I was told to play with trucks. For this, I was ridiculed by others and bullied. When I reported these incidents, I was told, be a man or don't be a girl. None of these incidents were taken seriously due to this treatment. I started building a barrier around myself from the outside world. I wouldn't speak to anyone. After all, if they didn't like who I really am, why show them anything of myself? It would just result in more bullying. For 6 years, I said nearly nothing. I had no friends. I sat in the back of the class silent. My mind was protecting me from the outside world. Imagine spending 6 years saying no more than a dozen words. That was me. After those 6 years, I developed a completely false persona to stop people from bullying me. I was living as someone else. I hated this false persona I had created. It wasn't me. I was very depressed. This situation led me to self-harm and later suicide attempts. I was miserable. I was tired of this, but I was terrified to show the world who I really was, because throughout all my life, I was told it was wrong for me to be who I truly am. I finally gained the courage to let go of this false persona and show who I really was. I was delighted to let go of that pressure, but I didn't foresee what was to come. I was physically, mentally, and sexually assaulted by other students and was too scared to report the incidents. This led me back into my suicidal state. My mind was going back into a hiding mode. The world was fading around me. The world is still fading around me, all because people won't accept me for who I am. I am fading back into a state of crippling depression. This could all be avoided for future students if they had support from the school staff, if they helped the victim instead of ridiculing them. Please, you can prevent this from happening to others. Support trans children. They need your help.
Our next speaker is Zimbabwe Matatau. I think he left. That concludes public forum. Madam Chair, move adjourn.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.